Imagine a land where history isn't just written on parchment, but etched into mountains, whispered through desert winds, and reflected in the glittering tiles of ancient mosques. A land where empires rose and fell, only to be reborn from their ashes, much like the mythical phoenix. This is Iran, a name that conjures images of poets and warriors, magnificent gardens and bustling bazaars, deep spirituality and profound resilience. For many in the West, Iran often appears as a puzzle, a land of headlines and complex modern politics. But to truly understand its present, we must journey deep into its past, a past that stretches back millennia, long before the empires of Greece or Rome even dreamed of their vastness. This isn't just the story of a country, it's the saga of a civilization, Persia, as it was known for centuries, that has profoundly influenced the world, from the concept of human rights to the very idea of empire itself. Iran has gifted humanity with masterpieces of poetry that speak of love and loss, scientific advancements that charted the stars, and philosophical insights that shaped major religions. It was here that some of the world's first great empires were forged, where Cyrus the Great laid the foundations for an unprecedented approach to governance, and where Zoroaster's ancient teachings offered a vision of cosmic struggle between good and evil that resonated across continents. This audiobook is your guide through that incredible journey. We will explore the ancient whispers of the Elamites, ride alongside the mighty Achaemenid and Sasanian emperors, witness the transformative embrace of Islam, and marvel at the artistic and intellectual flourishes of Persianate dynasties. We will navigate periods of invasion and turmoil, seeing how the Iranian spirit, time and again, rebuilt and redefined itself, absorbing new influences while fiercely guarding its unique identity. Finally, we will arrive at modern Iran, grappling with the echoes of its past as it charts its future in a rapidly changing world. So, lean back, listen closely, and prepare to be transported to a land of enduring tales, a civilization that has refused to fade, forever rising like the phoenix from its own rich history. Chapter 1, Genesis and Ancient Whispers. Our story begins not with kings or empires, but with the very earth itself, the vast, arid, yet surprisingly fertile Iranian plateau, nestled between mountain ranges to the west and east, a natural bridge between Asia and Europe. For millennia, this rugged landscape has been a crucible for human civilization, quietly fostering communities while Mesopotamia, to its west, boomed with its famous city-states. Long before any recognizable Iran existed, the earliest traces of human activity here date back hundreds of thousands of years. Stone tools and cave paintings speak of hunter-gatherers adapting to dramatic climatic shifts. As the last ice age receded, around 10,000 years ago, the first true agricultural settlements began to appear in the Zagros Mountains and along the plateau's river valleys. These were communities learning to tame the land, to cultivate wheat and barley, and to domesticate animals, the very foundations of sedentary life. Tepe Sayalk, in central Iran, is one such ancient mound, revealing layers of human habitation stretching back over 7 millennia, a testament to the enduring appeal of this region. But it was around 3200 BCE, as writing first emerged in Mesopotamia, that a truly distinct and enigmatic civilization began to flourish in the southwest of the plateau, the Elamites. Their heartland was Susiana, a fertile plain at the foot of the Zagros, dominated by their magnificent capital, Susa. Unlike their Sumerian neighbors, whose cuneiform tablets have spoken volumes, the Elamites left behind a script, Proto-Elamite, that remains largely undeciphered, shrouding much of their early history in tantalizing mystery. What we do know is that the Elamites were formidable. For nearly 3 millennia, they existed as a powerful and often defiant counterpoint to the Mesopotamian empires, Sumerian, Akkadian, Babylonian, and Assyrian. Their cities boasted impressive brick architecture, sophisticated irrigation systems, and a rich artistic tradition evident in their intricate seals, bronze work, and distinctive pottery. They were masters of metalwork, pioneering techniques that would later spread across the ancient world. Their pantheon of gods, their unique political structures, and their enduring resistance against more well-known powers reveal a complex and advanced society. The ziggurat of Choga Zanbil, a colossal step pyramid dedicated to the Elamite god in Shushanak, stands today as a silent, awe-inspiring monument to their engineering prowess and deep spiritual life. Yet, even as the Elamites thrived in the southwest, the vast northern and eastern expanses of the Iranian plateau remained a realm of nomadic and semi-nomadic groups. It was into this landscape, somewhere between 1500 and 800 BCE, that new peoples began to migrate. These were the Aryans, Indo-European tribes who arrived in successive waves, bringing with them new languages, new technologies, and a new way of life centered around horse rearing and a distinct religious worldview that worshipped deities of the sky and fire. These Aryan tribes gradually settled across the plateau, giving rise to distinct groups. To the northwest, around the modern city of Hamadan, established themselves the Medes. To the south, in the region that would one day be known as Persis or Fars, settled the Parsa, or Persians. These migrations weren't sudden invasions but a gradual process of infiltration, settlement, and interaction with the existing populations, including the Elamites. Over centuries, these newcomers adapted to the landscape, absorbed elements of the local cultures, and began to lay the groundwork for something entirely new. The Elamites, for all their strength, would eventually fade, though their legacy, particularly their administrative practices and artistic styles, would subtly endure. But from the interaction of these ancient inhabitants and the newly arrived Aryans, a new chapter in Iranian history was about to be written, one that would soon birth an empire of unprecedented scale and vision. The ancient whispers were becoming a roar, signaling the dawn of the Achaemenid age. Chapter 2, The First Empire, Achaemenid Splendor. As the Aryan tribes settled the Iranian plateau, a new power dynamic began to emerge. The Medes, establishing their capital at Ecbatana, forged the first truly organized state on the plateau. They were skilled horsemen and warriors, and for a time, they held sway over their southern kin, the Persians. The Medes formed a formidable kingdom, eventually participating in the destruction of the mighty Assyrian Empire, a force that had terrorized the Near East for centuries. For a brief but significant period, the Median Empire was a dominant power, laying crucial groundwork for what was to come. But the stage was set for an even grander vision. From the southern region of Persis, a new lineage of leaders, the Achaemenids, began to assert themselves. Their story is personified by one of history's most remarkable figures, Cyrus the Great. Born into the Persian royal family, Cyrus initially served as a vassal king under the Medes. However, around 550 BCE, a dramatic turn of events unfolded. Cyrus rebelled against his Median grandfather, Astyages, and in a surprising display of military acumen and political charisma, swiftly absorbed the Median Empire into his burgeoning Persian domain. This wasn't a brutal conquest in the usual sense. Many Median nobles, impressed by Cyrus, joined his cause, marking a more unified beginning. Cyrus was not merely a conqueror, he was a revolutionary statesman. His empire expanded rapidly, but it was his unique approach to governance that truly set him apart. In 539 BCE, when he marched into Babylon, the jewel of Mesopotamia, he didn't raze the city or enslave its people. Instead, he famously issued the Cyrus Cylinder, often hailed as one of the earliest declarations of human rights. This clay cylinder proclaimed respect for local customs, religions, and traditions, allowing conquered peoples to return to their homes and worship their own gods. This policy of tolerance and integration, rather than brutal subjugation, became a hallmark of the Achaemenid Empire. It fostered loyalty and stability across a vast, multi-ethnic domain, stretching from Egypt to India. After Cyrus's death, his son Cambyses too briefly expanded the empire into Egypt. But it was Darius the Great, a distant cousin who ascended to the throne amidst some internal strife, who truly cemented the Achaemenid legacy. Darius was a master organizer. He divided the immense empire into 20 highly efficient administrative provinces called satrapies, each governed by a satrap, governor, who was personally loyal to the king, but also overseen by military commanders and royal inspectors, ensuring checks and balances. To facilitate trade, communication, and swift military deployment, Darius embarked on monumental infrastructure projects. The most famous was the Royal Road, a network of meticulously maintained highways stretching over 1,600 miles from Susa to Sardis, complete with postal stations and fresh horses. This marvel of ancient engineering allowed messages and goods to traverse the empire with unprecedented speed, knitting together its diverse regions. He also standardized coinage, introduced a universal legal code, and fostered a sophisticated bureaucracy that allowed the empire to function smoothly. It was under Darius that the magnificent capital city of Persepolis began to take shape. Carved into the mountainside, this grand ceremonial complex was not just a seat of power but a vibrant symbol of imperial might and cultural diversity. Its towering columns, intricate reliefs depicting delegates from every corner of the empire bringing tribute, and vast halls, were designed to impress and awe, a testament to the Achaemenid vision of a harmonious, universal empire. Central to Achaemenid thought and governance was the ancient religion of Zoroastrianism. While not officially a state religion, its principles deeply influenced the kings. Founded by the prophet Zarathustra, Zoroaster, it taught a dualistic cosmology, a cosmic struggle between Asha, truth, order, and Druj, falsehood, disorder, presided over by a wise, benevolent god, Ahura Mazda. The Achaemenid kings saw themselves as agents of Ahura Mazda, bringing order and justice to the world. Their tolerance towards other religions stemmed, in part, from this belief in a universal divine order that encompassed all peoples. The Achaemenid Empire, however, was not without its challenges. Its western frontier, particularly the Greek city-states in Ionia and mainland Greece, proved to be a persistent thorn. The Greco-Persian Wars, a series of conflicts in the early 5th century BCE, pitted the vast Persian military machine against the fiercely independent Greek city-states. Battles like Marathon, Thermopylae, and Salamis became legendary, shaping the narratives of both East and West. While Persia did not conquer mainland Greece, these wars, often portrayed as a clash between Eastern despotism and Western freedom, were in reality more complex, reflecting the expansionist ambitions of a global empire meeting the tenacious resistance of emerging regional powers. Despite these struggles, the Achaemenid Empire endured for over 2 centuries, a testament to its innovative administrative system, its policy of tolerance, and its unparalleled military might. It left an indelible mark on art, architecture, and political thought, demonstrating how a vast, multicultural empire could be governed not solely through force, but through a unique blend of authority and respect. Yet, even the greatest empires are subject to the tides of history. Internal intrigues, succession disputes, and the sheer challenge of governing such a vast realm began to wear at its foundations. A shadow was beginning to fall from the west, a new conqueror with an unprecedented ambition, whose arrival would bring this glorious first empire to an end, paving the way for a new, Hellenic chapter in Iran's enduring story. Chapter 3, The Hellenic Interlude, Alexander and the Seleucids. The majestic Achaemenid Empire, which had spanned continents and endured for over 2 centuries, finally met its match in a young, brilliant, and utterly relentless Macedonian king, Alexander the Great. Fueled by a desire for vengeance against Persia for its past invasions of Greece, and perhaps even more by an insatiable ambition, Alexander crossed into Asia Minor in 334 BCE. What followed was a lightning campaign that stunned the ancient world. In a series of decisive battles, Granicus, Issus, and finally, the climactic encounter at Gaugamela in 331 BCE, Alexander systematically dismantled the seemingly invincible Persian army. The last Achaemenid emperor, Darius III, despite his valiant efforts, could not stem the tide. His empire, vast and diverse, ultimately succumbed to Alexander's disciplined phalanxes and cavalry, coupled with his unparalleled tactical genius. Persepolis, the gleaming heart of the Persian realm, was taken and famously burned, an act whose motivations are still debated, but which powerfully symbolized the end of one era and the violent inauguration of another. Alexander's conquest was not merely a change of rulers, it was a profound cultural shockwave. He aimed not just to conquer, but to merge, to forge a new Hellenistic world where Greek culture and language intertwined with local traditions. He encouraged his soldiers to marry Persian women, even taking a Persian princess, Roxana, as his wife. He adopted certain Persian court customs and administrative structures, retaining the satrapy system, albeit with Macedonian or Greek governors. New cities were founded, many named Alexandria, serving as military garrisons, trade hubs, and centers for the dissemination of Greek culture, from language and philosophy to architecture and art. However, Alexander's grand vision of a unified Greco-Persian empire was cut tragically short. In 323 BCE, at the age of 32, he died suddenly in Babylon, leaving no clear heir to his immense, sprawling dominion. The vacuum he left ignited a brutal struggle among his generals, known as the Diadochi, successors. For decades, these formidable warlords carved up Alexander's empire in a series of internecine wars that reshaped the map of the ancient world. Eventually, out of this chaotic crucible, three major Hellenistic kingdoms emerged. In Egypt, the Ptolemies established their dynasty. In Macedon and Greece, the Antigonids took control. And in the vast eastern territories, encompassing most of the former Achaemenid Empire including Mesopotamia and the Iranian plateau, Seleucus I Nicator rose to prominence. Seleucus, one of Alexander's most capable generals, shrewdly consolidated his power. By 312 BCE, he had established the Seleucid Empire, a behemoth that at its peak stretched from Anatolia to the borders of India. The Seleucids adopted Antioch in Syria as their primary capital, but they also founded numerous other cities across their eastern domains, most notably Seleucia on the Tigris in Mesopotamia, which became a significant administrative and cultural center. Under Seleucid rule, the Iranian plateau experienced a distinct cultural overlay. Greek became the language of administration, elite culture, and trade. Gymnasiums, theaters, and Greek-style temples appeared in cities, reflecting the new cultural norms. Greek philosophy and science found new audiences, and Greek settlers, including veterans and traders, established communities throughout the region. This period saw a fascinating blend, or syncretism, of Greek and Iranian elements in art, architecture, and even religious practices. Yet, despite this Hellenic veneer, the deep-rooted Iranian identity never truly vanished. For the native Iranian populations, Seleucid rule was often viewed as foreign. While the Achaemenids, even with their vast diversity, had been an Iranian empire, the Seleucids were seen as outsiders. Their focus tended to be on their western territories, particularly Syria, which often meant that the eastern satrapies, including those on the Iranian plateau, felt increasingly neglected or only lightly controlled. This vastness, coupled with the Seleucids' constant engagement in wars with other Hellenistic powers to their west, the Ptolemies in Egypt, and later the rising power of Rome, created fertile ground for discontent and a yearning for a return to indigenous rule. The seeds of resistance were sown, particularly in the more remote and culturally distinct eastern regions of the empire. It was from these resilient Iranian lands, often overlooked by their Hellenistic overlords, that a new power would soon emerge, one that would not only challenge Seleucid authority but would ultimately drive Greek rule out of the Iranian plateau, ushering in a period where indigenous Iranian empires would once again assert their sovereignty and cultural distinctiveness. The Hellenic Interlude, while impactful, was destined to be just that, an interlude. Chapter 4, The Parthian Horsemen, a Return to Iranian Roots. The vast Seleucid Empire, for all its Greek cities and Hellenic culture, harbored a critical weakness: its immense size and its consistent focus on its western borders. This left the eastern satrapies, including the Iranian plateau, vulnerable and often resentful. It was in this fertile ground of a receding foreign power and enduring local identity that a new force began to coalesce, one that would fundamentally reshape the political landscape of Iran. Our attention now turns to the northeastern frontier of the Seleucid realm, a region known as Parthia, south of the Caspian Sea. Here, among the nomadic and semi-nomadic Parnai, a branch of the wider Scythian tribes, a charismatic leader named Arsaces emerged. Around 247 BCE, taking advantage of Seleucid preoccupations elsewhere, Arsaces led his people in a revolt, establishing an independent kingdom. This marked the birth of the Arsacid dynasty, more commonly known as the Parthian Empire. The Parthians were masters of a specific type of warfare, the mounted archer. Their ability to feign retreat, only to turn and unleash volleys of deadly arrows, a tactic famously known as the Parthian shot, made them formidable opponents. Their armies were not the rigid phalanxes of the Greeks, but swift, agile forces perfectly adapted to the vast, open plains of their homeland. This military prowess, combined with a pragmatic political approach, allowed them to gradually expand their territory. Over the next century and a half, the Parthians systematically chipped away at Seleucid control over the Iranian plateau and Mesopotamia. Mithridates I, a particularly ambitious and capable Arsacid king in the mid-2nd century BCE, was instrumental in this expansion, capturing vital territories and making Ctesiphon, on the Tigris River, their primary winter capital. The Seleucids, weakened by internal strife and wars with Rome, simply could not hold on. By the mid-1st century BCE, Greek rule had been largely expelled from the Iranian heartland, and the Parthian Empire stood as the dominant power, a formidable force stretching from the Euphrates to Afghanistan. What kind of empire was Parthia? Unlike the centralized Achaemenids or the Hellenistic Seleucids, the Parthian Empire was often described as a decentralized feudal system. While the Arsacid king was supreme, much power resided with powerful noble families and vassal kings. This loose structure, while sometimes leading to internal conflicts, also allowed for significant local autonomy, which often fostered loyalty among diverse populations. It was a pragmatic approach to governing a vast, multi-ethnic empire. Culturally, the Parthians oversaw a fascinating blend. Initially, they embraced many Hellenistic elements, especially in their early coinage and art. Greek remained an important language in administration and trade, and Greek cities continued to exist within their realm. However, as their empire matured and they consolidated their power, there was a conscious return to and promotion of Iranian traditions. Zoroastrianism, though not yet the state religion it would become under the Sasanians, was practiced, and Iranian customs gained prominence. The iconic Parthian rock reliefs, depicting kings in traditional Iranian attire, illustrate this gradual but definite shift away from purely Greek influence. But perhaps the most significant aspect of the Parthian Empire was its role as a major rival to Rome. For nearly 3 centuries, the Parthian and Roman empires stood as two colossal powers, constantly clashing over control of Mesopotamia and Armenia, vital borderlands that served as a buffer and a battleground. Battles like Carrhae in 53 BCE, where the Parthians decisively defeated a massive Roman army under Crassus, sent shockwaves through the Roman world and established Parthia as Rome's enduring eastern nemesis. These were not mere skirmishes. They were grand geopolitical struggles between two military giants, often resulting in devastating losses for both sides. The Silk Road, connecting China to the Mediterranean, also flourished under Parthian control, with the empire acting as a crucial intermediary for trade and cultural exchange between East and West. Despite their power and longevity, the Parthians faced persistent challenges. The decentralized nature of their empire meant that internal rebellions by powerful nobles were not uncommon. Constant warfare with Rome drained resources. Furthermore, the rise of new, unified powers on their eastern flanks also posed threats. Ultimately, it was not an external force that brought down the Parthians, but a resurgence from within the Iranian heartland. The Arsacid kings, for all their successes, had become somewhat detached from the core Persian identity that was stirring once more. From the province of Persis, the very birthplace of the Achaemenids, a new dynasty, steeped in the ancient traditions of Iran, was about to emerge. This new power, far from being just another kingdom, would represent a powerful cultural and religious revival, ushering in another golden age for the Iranian world. The Parthian horsemen, who had bravely reclaimed Iran's independence, would now make way for the fiery rebirth of a truly Persian empire. Chapter 5: The Sasanian Resurgence, Fire, Faith, and Empires. As the Parthian Empire entered its decline, weakened by centuries of conflict with Rome and internal feuds, the stage was set for a dramatic rebirth of Persian power and identity. This resurgence originated not from the northern Parthian homeland, but from the very heartland of ancient Persia itself, the province of Fars, the traditional home of the Achaemenids. Here, in the early 3rd century CE, a local ruler named Ardashir descended from a priestly lineage linked to the god Sazan, hence Sasanian, began to consolidate power. Ardashir, charismatic and militarily brilliant, openly challenged the weakening Arsacid dynasty. In 224 CE, in a decisive battle at Hormisdagan, he crushed the last Parthian king, Artabanus IV. This victory was more than just a change of rulers, it was a profound declaration. Ardashir proclaimed himself Shahanshah, King of Kings, and established the Sasanian Empire, marking a conscious return to the glory and centralized authority of the Achaemenids, and a deliberate revival of Persian cultural and religious traditions. The Sasanians envisioned themselves as the direct heirs of Cyrus and Darius. Their empire, at its height, would stretch from Anatolia and Egypt to Central Asia, encompassing much of the Near East. Unlike the more decentralized Parthians, the Sasanians built a highly centralized state, with a powerful bureaucracy and a rigid social hierarchy. Society was stratified into distinct classes: priests, magi, warriors, scribes, and commoners, each with their specific roles. Central to this new imperial identity was the rigorous promotion of Zoroastrianism as the state religion. While Zoroastrianism had been practiced throughout earlier Iranian empires, under the Sasanians it underwent a significant revival and institutionalization. Fire temples, dedicated to the worship of Ahura Mazda and his benevolent forces, proliferated across the empire. The priestly class, the magi, gained immense influence, and strict religious laws were often enforced. This religious fervor provided a unifying ideology for the empire, distinguishing it clearly from its Roman and Byzantine neighbors to the west and the various pagan or Buddhist traditions to the east. The Sasanian era was defined by nearly 4 centuries of epic and often brutal conflict with the Roman Empire, and later its successor, the Byzantine Empire. These were not mere border skirmishes, these were grand, existential struggles between two superpowers vying for dominance, control of vital trade routes, and strategic territories like Armenia and Mesopotamia. Sasanian shahs like Shapur I famously captured Roman Emperor Valerian in battle, a humiliation that resonated for centuries in the West. Later, Khusro I Anushiravan, the immortal soul, arguably the greatest of the Sasanian monarchs, presided over a golden age of the empire, marked by military victories, extensive building programs, and significant intellectual flourishing. The rivalry with Rome shaped not just the political landscape but also the artistic and architectural output of the Sasanians. Massive rock reliefs, carved into cliffsides at places like Nakshi Rustam and Taki Bostan, depict the Sasanians' military triumphs and their divine legitimacy, often showing them receiving the ring of power from Ahura Mazda himself. Iconic structures like the Archway of Ctesiphon, Taki Kasra, with its immense barrel vault, showcased unparalleled engineering skill and monumental scale. Beyond warfare and monumental construction, the Sasanian period was also a time of remarkable intellectual and cultural advancement. The Academy of Gundashapur became a leading center of learning, especially in medicine, philosophy, and astronomy, attracting scholars from across the known world, including Nestorian Christians and Greek philosophers. Here, ancient Greek texts were translated into Pahlavi, Middle Persian, Indian medical knowledge was embraced, and new scientific discoveries were made. Persian art, particularly exquisite metalwork, textiles, and intricate mosaics, reached new heights of sophistication, influencing artistic traditions far beyond Iran's borders. The Sasanian court was renowned for its lavishness, its refined culture, and its sophisticated administrative system. Yet, even this mighty empire, which had withstood the might of Rome and fostered a brilliant civilization, was not immune to the relentless march of history. Decades of exhausting warfare with Byzantium, internal power struggles, and a devastating plague left the empire weakened and its treasury depleted. A formidable, unified external force was gathering momentum on its southwestern borders, a force driven by a new faith emanating from the Arabian Peninsula, whose arrival would unleash the most profound transformation in Iranian history since the migrations of the Aryans themselves. The Sasanian, King of Kings, would soon face a challenge unlike any before, one that would redefine the very soul of Iran. Chapter 6: The Islamic Conquest and Transformation. The Sasanian Empire, for all its glory and resilience, had entered the 7th century CE exhausted. Decades of relentless, grinding warfare with the Byzantine Empire had drained both its manpower and its treasury. Dynastic struggles and internal dissent further weakened its foundations. It was at this precise moment of vulnerability that a new, unprecedented force emerged from the deserts of the Arabian Peninsula, a force united by a new faith, Islam. Under the leadership of the Prophet Muhammad, and after his death, by the Rashidun caliphs, the nascent Islamic armies burst forth with astonishing speed and conviction. Unlike the empires they would soon confront, they were not driven by dynastic ambition alone, but by a powerful, unifying religious zeal. The first significant encounter between the Sasanians and the Muslim Arabs occurred in 633 CE. What began as frontier skirmishes rapidly escalated. The decisive battles, Qadisiyah, around 636 CE, and Nahavand, 642 CE, were catastrophic for the Sasanians. At Qadisiyah, the legendary Sasanian general Rostam Farrukhzad was defeated and killed. Nahavand, famously known as the Victory of Victories, sealed the fate of the Sasanian state. The vast, imperial armies, though often outnumbering their opponents, were hampered by low morale, internal divisions, and the sheer momentum of the highly motivated Muslim forces. The last Sasanian Shahanshah, Yazdgerd III, became a tragic figure, perpetually fleeing eastward as his empire crumbled around him. For nearly a decade, he desperately sought allies and tried to rally resistance, but to no avail. He was eventually murdered in 651 CE in Merv, bringing an end to over 4 centuries of Sasanian rule and over a millennium of continuous Persian imperial tradition. The fall was swift, and for the Iranian people, it marked the end of an era, the end of their ancient, indigenous empires. But what did this conquest mean for the land and people of Iran? It was not an immediate, uniform transformation. While the political and military structures of the Sasanian state were dismantled, and a new Arab ruling elite took charge, the conversion to Islam was a gradual process, spanning centuries. Initially, Arab garrisons were established in key cities, and a poll tax, jizya, was levied on non-Muslims. Zoroastrians, along with Christians and Jews, were recognized as people of the book and largely tolerated, though they held a secondary status. The reasons for conversion were complex. Some converted for genuine faith, drawn to Islam's monotheism and emphasis on equality. Others may have converted for social or economic advantages, or to avoid the jizya. Over time, as Iranian Muslims gained influence within the new Islamic administration, and as Arabic became the language of power and scholarship, conversion accelerated. Crucially, while Arabic became the language of religion and governance, the Persian language did not die. Unlike other conquered lands where the indigenous language slowly faded, Persian underwent a remarkable transformation. Written now in the Arabic script, and enriched with many Arabic loanwords, it not only survived but flourished. This linguistic resilience was a testament to the deep cultural roots of Iran. The impact on Iranian culture was equally profound yet wonderfully adaptive. While the Zoroastrian fire temples gradually gave way to mosques, and the Sasanian artistic traditions evolved, they did not disappear. Instead, they profoundly influenced the development of Islamic art, architecture, and administration. Sasanian administrative techniques, courtly protocols, and even artistic motifs found their way into the emerging Islamic civilization. The initial period of Arab rule was often characterized by tension. Many Iranians felt a sense of cultural oppression under the Umayyad Caliphate, which favored Arab supremacy. This resentment contributed to the Abbasid Revolution in the mid-8th century. While led by a movement that claimed descent from the Prophet's family, the Abbasid Revolution drew immense support from non-Arab Muslims, especially from Khorasan in eastern Iran. The victory of the Abbasids ushered in a new era, moving the center of the Islamic world eastward to Baghdad, a city founded near the old Sasanian capital of Ctesiphon, and bringing a much greater Persian influence into the heart of the caliphate. This period, often called the Islamic Golden Age, saw Persian scholars, scientists, and administrators playing a central role. Figures like the Barmakids, a powerful Persian family, dominated the Abbasid court. Persian literature, philosophy, and sciences experienced a magnificent renaissance, now expressed through the medium of the revitalized Persian language and within the framework of Islamic scholarship. This was not a complete loss of identity, but rather a profound Persianate transformation of Islam itself, where Iranian genius contributed immeasurably to the new global civilization. The Islamic conquest was undeniably a seismic event, ending an ancient political order. But instead of extinguishing Iran's unique identity, it forced a remarkable act of cultural fusion and adaptation. From the ashes of the Sasanian Empire, a new, Islamic Iran was born, one that would not only embrace the new faith but would, in turn, profoundly shape its character and spread its influence across the vast reaches of the Dar al-Islam. Chapter 7: A Golden Age and Local Dynasties. The Abbasid Revolution in the mid-8th century marked a pivotal moment for Iran. While the Caliphate remained Arab-led, its center of gravity shifted eastward to the newly founded city of Baghdad, close to the ancient Sasanian capital. This relocation brought Persian influence directly to the heart of the Islamic Empire. Persian administrators, scholars, and artists flocked to the Abbasid court, contributing enormously to what became known as the Islamic Golden Age. This wasn't simply an Arab Golden Age, it was a truly cosmopolitan one, with Persian genius at its core. Iranian scholars like Al-Khwarizmi, whose work gave us the concepts of algebra and algorithms, and physicians like Avicenna, whose medical encyclopedia, the Canon of Medicine, remained a standard textbook for centuries, were at the forefront of global scientific inquiry. Observatories in cities like Maraga and Ray pushed the boundaries of astronomy. Persian poets, musicians, and architects infused the new Islamic aesthetic with their ancient traditions, creating a vibrant, unique cultural synthesis. The Abbasid Caliph Harun al-Rashid, familiar to many from 1001 Nights, famously hosted lavish courts where Persian culture and scholarship flourished. Yet, even as Persian influence permeated the Abbasid court, the vastness of the caliphate began to strain its central control. As the 9th and 10th centuries progressed, semi-independent or fully independent local dynasties, often of Iranian origin, began to emerge in the more distant provinces, particularly in the east of the Iranian plateau. These were not challenges to Islam, but rather assertions of regional power and, importantly, a revival of the Persian language and identity in their administrative and cultural spheres. This period ushered in a true Persianate cultural renaissance. Among the first and most significant of these was the Samanid dynasty, 819 to 999 CE, centered in Khorasan and Transoxiana, modern-day Uzbekistan and Tajikistan. The Samanids were zealous patrons of Persian culture. They actively promoted the use of New Persian, funding poets and scholars who wrote in the language, effectively cementing its survival and ensuring its literary future. It was under their patronage that Ferdowsi, Iran's national poet, began his monumental epic, the Shahnameh or Book of Kings, a masterpiece that painstakingly retold the mythical and historical past of Iran, from creation to the Arab conquest, providing a foundational text for Persian national identity. The Samanids were also keen on urban development, establishing splendid libraries and schools that became centers of learning for the entire region. Following or sometimes alongside the Samanids, other Iranian dynasties asserted themselves. The Buyids, 934 to 1062 CE. Of Elamite origin, rose to prominence in western Iran and Mesopotamia, eventually taking control of Baghdad itself and holding the Abbasid caliphs as mere figureheads. The Buyids, unique for their time, were Twelver Shurites, laying some early groundwork for Shurism's later prominence in Iran. They were also notable for commissioning scientific works and promoting Persian art and architecture, reflecting a complex political landscape where multiple powers vied for influence within the broader Islamic framework. Then came the Ghaznavids, 977 to 1186 CE, a Turkic-origin dynasty that emerged from the city of Ghazni, in modern Afghanistan. While Turkic in their military and ruling elite, they were deeply Persianized in their administration, culture, and courtly life. Their most famous ruler, Mahmud of Ghazni, was a formidable conqueror who launched numerous campaigns into India, spreading Islam and accumulating immense wealth. Despite their military might and the imposition of a strong centralized rule, they, too, continued to patronize Persian literature and art, further cementing the reach of Persianate culture. This era, from the 9th to the 11th centuries, was a period of immense vibrancy for Iran. It demonstrated that even after a monumental conquest and religious transformation, the essence of Iranian civilization not only endured but found new avenues for expression and unparalleled flourishing within the new Islamic context. It was a time when the Persian language was revived and standardized, when philosophical debates were lively, and when scientific inquiry reached new heights. However, the very dynamics that allowed these local dynasties to flourish also created a fragmented political landscape. The rise of Turkic military strongmen, initially as mercenaries and then as rulers, would soon bring new waves of nomadic power onto the Iranian plateau, culminating in the arrival of a new Turkic dynasty that would once again reshape the destiny of Iran, and indeed, much of the Middle East. The stage was set for the powerful, yet often disruptive, arrival of the Seljuk Turks. Chapter 8, Turkic and Mongol Waves. The dynamic political landscape of 10th and 11th century Iran, characterized by the rise and fall of local Persianate dynasties, was about to be dramatically reconfigured by a new, powerful force, the Turkic nomadic peoples from Central Asia. These groups, often skilled horsemen and fierce warriors, had for centuries been pressing against the settled lands to their south and west. Many had already been incorporated into the armies of the Samanids and Ghaznavids as slave soldiers or mercenaries, but now they would arrive as conquerors and rulers in their own right. The most significant of these new arrivals were the Seljuk Turks. Led by the Seljuk family, these nomadic tribes embraced Sunni Islam and, driven by a combination of military prowess and a yearning for new pastures, began their systematic expansion. In the mid-11th century, under leaders like Togrul Beg, they decisively defeated the Ghaznavids and, in 1055, marched into Baghdad, effectively ending the Buyid control over the Abbasid Caliph. The Caliph, eager to be freed from Buyid Shurite domination, welcomed the Seljuks as Sunni liberators. The Seljuk Empire was vast, stretching from Central Asia to Anatolia. While Turkic in origin and military leadership, the Seljuks quickly adopted the existing Persian bureaucratic and cultural traditions. Persian became the language of administration and culture at their courts. Great Persian viziers, like the legendary Nizam al-Mulk, served the Seljuk sultans, masterminding an elaborate administrative system, establishing madrasas, religious schools, to promote Sunni Islam, and patronizing scholars and artists. It was under Seljuk patronage that figures like the poet and mathematician Omar Khayyam flourished. Their rule ushered in a period of relative political unity across much of the Iranian plateau after centuries of fragmentation, contributing to the continued flourishing of Persianate civilization. However, the political stability brought by the Seljuks was eventually undermined by internal divisions and the Seljuk tradition of dividing territories among family members. As the 12th century progressed, the powerful unified Seljuk Empire fragmented into smaller, often warring, Seljuk sultanates and various independent local rulers. This fragmentation, unfortunately, left the Iranian plateau vulnerable to an even more terrifying storm brewing in the east. In the early 13th century, a force of unprecedented scale and ferocity swept across Asia, the Mongols. Under the legendary Genghis Khan, these steppe warriors, masters of cavalry and siege warfare, created the largest contiguous land empire in history. Their arrival in Iran, beginning around 1219 CE, was nothing short of catastrophic. Cities were razed, irrigation systems destroyed, and populations massacred. The destruction was immense, arguably the greatest demographic and material devastation Iran had ever experienced. Major centers of learning, culture, and population like Nishapur and Ray were utterly annihilated. Yet, even in the wake of such devastation, the Iranian spirit proved resilient. After the initial shock and destruction, the Mongol conquerors, particularly the descendants of Genghis Khan, began to settle and adopt elements of the conquered cultures. In Iran, this led to the establishment of the Ilkhanate, 1256 to 1335 CE, founded by Hulagu Khan, Genghis's grandson, who also brought an end to the Abbasid Caliphate in Baghdad in 1258. Remarkably, these Mongol rulers, initially shamanists or Buddhists, eventually converted to Islam, with the Ilkhan Ghazan Khan making Islam the official religion of the Ilkhanate in 1295. This conversion was often to Sunni Islam, but under the later Ilkhans, there was growing Shiite influence. As with the Seljuks, the Mongols, though foreign in origin, became deeply Persianized. They continued to patronize Persian art, architecture, and scholarship. Grand new mosques were built, scientific observatories flourished, like the one at Maraga under the patronage of the Ilkhan Hulagu Khan, led by the Persian polymath Nasir al-Din al-Tusi, and historical works chronicling both Mongol and Iranian history were commissioned. The famed Persian miniature painting tradition also saw significant development under Ilkhanid patronage, often blending Chinese artistic influences brought by the Mongols with traditional Persian styles. After the collapse of the Ilkhanate in the mid-14th century, Iran once again fragmented into numerous smaller dynasties and local rulers. This instability was further compounded by the arrival of another formidable Turco-Mongol conqueror in the late 14th century, Timur, also known as Tamerlane. Timur, though himself a Muslim and a great patron of arts and sciences in his capital Samarkand, was known for his ruthless campaigns that brought further destruction to many parts of Iran. However, the Timurid period, 1370 to 1507 CE, also saw a brilliant cultural renaissance, especially in architecture and miniature painting, further enriching the Persianate world. These waves of Turkic and Mongol invasions profoundly shaped Iran. They brought new ruling elites, new military techniques, and significant demographic shifts. Yet, the enduring strength of Persian culture, its language, literature, and administrative traditions, proved remarkably absorptive. Time and again, the invaders, once settled, became patrons and practitioners of the very culture they had conquered. This continuous process of cultural assimilation and adaptation was a hallmark of Iran's historical resilience, preparing the ground for the next great turning point, the rise of a truly unified, Shiite Iranian empire. Chapter 9, The Safavid Revolution, Shi'ism and Nationhood. For centuries after the Arab conquest, Iran had remained largely Sunni, like the rest of the Islamic world, even as independent Persianate dynasties flourished. But the beginning of the 16th century would witness a religious and political revolution that fundamentally reshaped Iran's destiny and set it apart from its neighbors. This was the rise of the Safavid dynasty. The Safavids emerged from a Sufi order in Azerbaijan, the Safaviya, which had a long history but began to embrace increasingly radical Shiite doctrines. At their head was a charismatic and fiercely determined young leader named Ismail. Gathering a devoted following of Kizilbash, Turkic-speaking nomadic tribesmen distinguished by their red headgear, Ismail launched a series of military campaigns that, with astonishing speed, unified the fragmented Iranian plateau. In 1501, at the tender age of 14, Shah Ismail I proclaimed himself the first Shah of the Safavid Empire and, crucially, declared Twelver Shi'ism to be the official state religion of Iran. This was a monumental and audacious decision. While Shi'ism had existed in various forms across the Islamic world, no major state had ever adopted it as its exclusive official creed. Ismail immediately set about converting the predominantly Sunni population, often through forceful means, and inviting Shiite scholars from other parts of the Islamic world to establish religious institutions and propagate the faith. This act was more than just a religious shift, it was a political masterstroke. By adopting Shi'ism, Ismail provided a powerful new unifying ideology for Iran, distinct from the Sunni Ottoman Empire to its west and the Sunni Uzbeks to its northeast. It gave Iran a unique identity on the global stage and fostered a profound sense of nationhood, distinct from the broader Sunni caliphate that had dominated the region for centuries. The Safavid state became a theocracy, where religious and political authority were deeply intertwined. The early Safavid period was marked by continuous warfare. To the west, the formidable Ottoman Empire, the undisputed superpower of the Islamic world, saw the rise of a Shiite state on its border as both a religious heresy and a geopolitical threat. The devastating Battle of Calderon in 1514, where the technologically superior Ottoman army crushed the Kizilbash, highlighted the military challenges the Safavids faced. To the northeast, the Uzbeks, another powerful Sunni Turkic group, constantly threatened Iran's eastern frontiers. These protracted conflicts defined Safavid foreign policy and shaped its military development. Despite these challenges, the Safavids gradually consolidated their power, culminating in the reign of Shah Abbas the Great, 1588 to 1629. Abbas is arguably the most celebrated of the Safavid monarchs, presiding over a true golden age for the empire. Recognizing the need for military reform, he curtailed the power of the Kizilbash and created a new standing army composed of Georgian, Armenian, and Circassian converts, armed with muskets and cannons, effectively modernizing the Safavid military to match the Ottomans. Under Shah Abbas, Iran truly flourished. He moved the capital to Isfahan, transforming it into one of the most magnificent cities in the world, a true jewel of Islamic architecture. The Naqshi Jahan Square, with its towering mosques, like the Imam Mosque and Sheikh Lotfallah Mosque, the Ali Kapu Palace, and the Grand Bazaar, was designed to be a dazzling testament to Safavid power and piety. Abbas promoted international trade, especially in silk, and cultivated diplomatic relations with European powers, seeking allies against the Ottomans. He encouraged the arts, sponsoring exquisite Persian miniature painting, calligraphy, ceramics, and carpet weaving, all of which reached unparalleled levels of sophistication. The Safavid era solidified a unique Iranian identity, blending ancient Persian traditions with Twelver Shurism. It forged a distinct cultural and political entity that, despite later dynasties and changes in governance, would largely define Iran up to the modern era. The deep-seated popular reverence for the Shiite imams became a powerful force in national life, often transcending direct state control. However, after Shah Abbas, the Safavid Empire slowly began to decline. Weak rulers, lavish court life, internal mismanagement, and persistent external pressures from the Ottomans and a resurgent Russia gradually eroded its power. By the early 18th century, the once mighty Safavid state was vulnerable. In a stunning turn of events, in 1722, a relatively small force of Afghan Ghilzai tribesmen, led by Mahmud Hotak, managed to capture Isfahan and bring an end to the Safavid dynasty. The fall of the Safavids plunged Iran into a period of chaos and fragmentation, but their legacy was indelible. They had indelibly stamped Iran with a Shiite identity that would become a cornerstone of its national character and a source of both unity and distinction in the centuries to come. The stage was now set for a new era of upheaval, brief periods of strong rule, and increasing foreign interference. Chapter 10, Turmoil and Transition, Afsharids, Zands, Qajars. The collapse of the Safavid Empire in 1722, brought down by an Afghan invasion, plunged Iran into a half-century of chaos, civil war, and fragmentation. The magnificent Safavid state, which had given Iran a distinct Shiite identity and a period of artistic splendor, dissolved into a patchwork of competing warlords and local powers. Yet, from this turmoil, a series of new, albeit often short-lived, dynasties would emerge, each attempting to restore order and reassert Iranian sovereignty amidst growing external pressures. The first to rise from the ashes was Nader Shah Afshar, reigned 1736 to 1747. A brilliant, ruthless military commander of Turkic origin, Nader began his career serving the last Safavid remnants. Through sheer force of will and military genius, he expelled the Afghans, reunited Iran, and then embarked on a series of astonishing conquests that briefly made Iran the most powerful empire in Asia. He sacked Delhi, returning with immense treasures, including the legendary Peacock Throne and the Kohinoor Diamond. Nader Shah was a conqueror in the mold of Timur, expanding Iran's borders to their greatest extent since the Sasanian era. However, his relentless campaigns, heavy taxes, and increasingly paranoid and brutal rule ultimately alienated his subjects. He was assassinated in 1747, and his vast empire, built solely on his personal charisma and military might, collapsed immediately into civil war. Following Nader Shah's demise, a period of renewed conflict ensued, out of which emerged the more benevolent figure of Karim Khan Zand, reigned 1750 to 1779. A tribal leader of the Zand tribe from western Iran, Karim Khan refused the title of Shah, preferring to be known as Vakil-e-Ra'aya, or Regent of the People. He established his capital in Shiraz, which he adorned with beautiful gardens, mosques, and administrative buildings, turning it into a center of art and culture. Karim Khan brought a rare period of peace, stability, and relative prosperity to central and southern Iran. He focused on internal development, trade, and justice, rather than aggressive expansion. His reign is often remembered as a golden age of stability and a return to some semblance of order after decades of warfare. However, the Zand dynasty, like Nader's, was ultimately a personal achievement tied to one strong leader. Upon Karim Khan's death, civil war erupted once more. This protracted struggle culminated in the rise of the Qajar dynasty, 1789 to 1925, founded by Agha Muhammad Khan Qajar. Agha Muhammad Khan was a eunuch, castrated by Nader Shah, who was driven by a burning ambition and a chillingly ruthless determination. He systematically defeated his rivals, brutally consolidating power and establishing Tehran as his new capital. He famously massacred the population of Kerman after his final victory, a horrific act meant to deter any further resistance. The Qajar period, lasting for over 130 years, marked a new phase in Iranian history, characterized by both internal struggles and, crucially, increasing entanglement with European powers. Russia, expanding southwards, and Great Britain, eager to protect its Indian empire and trade routes, began to exert immense pressure on Iran. Through a series of unequal treaties following military defeats, most notably the treaties of Gulistan in 1813 and Turkmenchai in 1828 with Russia, Iran lost vast territories in the Caucasus, including modern-day Georgia, Armenia, and Azerbaijan. These defeats exposed the Qajar's military weakness and technological backwardness compared to the rapidly industrializing European powers. The Qajar Shahs, often struggling with empty treasuries and weak central authority, resorted to granting lucrative concessions to foreign companies and governments in exchange for desperately needed funds. These concessions, involving everything from telegraph lines to banking and the hugely profitable tobacco monopoly, became a source of deep national humiliation and popular resentment. This foreign encroachment fueled early stirrings of modern Iranian nationalism and a desire for reform. The most significant manifestation of this growing discontent was the Constitutional Revolution of 1905 to 1911. Driven by a coalition of merchants, intellectuals, Shiite clerics, and ordinary citizens, the revolution demanded a written constitution, a parliament, majlis, and limits on the absolute power of the Shah. After significant struggle and even bombardment of the majlis by the Shah's Cossack brigade, backed by Russia, a limited constitution was eventually established, making Iran a constitutional monarchy. This was a radical experiment, a bid to modernize and assert sovereignty, and it inspired reform movements across the region. The discovery of oil in 1908 in southwestern Iran by the British, leading to the formation of the Anglo-Persian Oil Company, later BP, added another layer of geopolitical complexity. Iran's vast oil reserves became a key prize in the great power game, further entangling the country in international rivalries and highlighting its growing economic vulnerability. By the early 20th century, the Qajar dynasty was crumbling. World War I saw Iran's territory violated by warring foreign powers despite its official neutrality, leading to famine and immense suffering. The central government was barely functional, and regional warlords held sway. The stage was set for another strongman to emerge, one who would finally put an end to the Qajar era and attempt to pull Iran into the modern age with a far more ambitious and authoritarian vision. The long period of turmoil was about to transition into a new chapter of state-led modernization. Chapter 11, The Pahlavi Shahs, Modernization and Its Discontents. By the early 20th century, Qajar Iran was a shadow of its former self, weak, fragmented, and increasingly a pawn in the geopolitical games of stronger European powers. The central government barely held sway outside of Tehran, and the country was economically exploited. It was into this vacuum that a powerful new figure emerged from the military, Reza Khan. A shrewd and ambitious officer in the Persian Cossack Brigade, Reza Khan orchestrated a coup in 1921. Within a few years, he had consolidated power, effectively sidelined the last Qajar Shah, and in 1925, he deposed the dynasty entirely. He then crowned himself Reza Shah Pahlavi, establishing a new, modernizing dynasty named after the ancient Persian word for heroic or noble. His ambition was nothing less than to transform Iran into a strong, independent, and modern nation-state, much like contemporary Turkey under Ataturk. Reza Shah's reign, 1925 to 1941, was characterized by a relentless drive for top-down modernization and state-building. He implemented sweeping reforms aimed at secularizing society and strengthening the central government. This included establishing a modern, centralized army, building Iran's first trans-Iranian railway, and founding the first modern university, the University of Tehran. He abolished traditional titles, created a modern bureaucracy, and pushed for legal reforms that aimed to reduce the power of the clerical establishment. Women were encouraged to remove the veil, and Western dress became common, especially among the urban elite. He emphasized an ancient, pre-Islamic Iranian identity, renaming the country from Persia to Iran in 1935 to highlight its Aryan roots. However, this modernization came at a significant cost to personal freedoms. Reza Shah's rule was increasingly authoritarian and repressive. Political dissent was crushed, traditional institutions were undermined, and the press was tightly controlled. His reforms, while transformative, often alienated large segments of the population, particularly the deeply religious and those in rural areas who felt disconnected from his secular agenda. Iran's neutrality in World War II proved untenable. Despite Reza Shah's attempts to maintain independence, the Allied powers, Britain and the Soviet Union, fearing his perceived pro-German sympathies and needing Iran's railway to supply the Soviet front, invaded Iran in 1941. Reza Shah was forced to abdicate in favor of his young son, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi. The early years of Mohammad Reza Shah's reign, 1941 to 1979, were marked by renewed political openness and a burgeoning nationalist movement, particularly centered around the issue of oil. The British-owned Anglo-Iranian Oil Company, which controlled Iran's vast oil resources, was seen as a symbol of foreign exploitation. This sentiment culminated in the rise of the charismatic Prime Minister Mohammad Mossadegh, who, in 1951, successfully nationalized the Iranian oil industry, a move wildly popular domestically but fiercely opposed by Britain and the United States. Mossadegh's nationalization efforts and his increasingly democratic leanings challenged the Shah's authority. In 1953, a joint British-American intelligence operation, codenamed Operation Ajax, orchestrated a coup that overthrew Mossadegh and restored the Shah to full power. This event would cast a long shadow over U.S.-Iran relations and deeply inform Iranian nationalist and anti-imperialist sentiment for decades to come. With American backing, Mohammad Reza Shah embarked on an ambitious program of reform known as the White Revolution in the 1960s. This included land reform, literacy programs, and the expansion of women's rights, aimed at modernizing Iran's economy and society. Oil revenues, particularly after the 1973 oil crisis, fueled massive industrial development and an increase in living standards for some. Iran became a regional powerhouse, a key ally of the West, and the Shah projected an image of a progressive and stable nation. However, beneath the gleaming facade of modernization, deep resentment simmered. The White Revolution, while beneficial to some, disrupted traditional social structures and created new inequalities. The rapid pace of westernization alienated religious conservatives and traditionalists. The Shah's increasingly authoritarian rule, enforced by the notorious Savak secret police, stifled political dissent and alienated intellectuals and the burgeoning middle class. Wealth became concentrated in the hands of a few, and corruption was rampant. The disconnect between the Shah's grand vision and the realities faced by ordinary Iranians grew wider. A powerful opposition movement began to coalesce, drawing together disparate elements: disillusioned intellectuals, university students, urban poor, traditional merchants, bazaris, and, crucially, the Shiite clergy. From his exile, an elderly and revered cleric named Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini emerged as the spiritual and political leader of this growing discontent. His message resonated widely, criticizing the Shah's secularism, his close ties to the West, and his authoritarianism, calling for an Islamic government based on justice and popular sovereignty. By the late 1970s, the simmering discontent erupted into widespread protests and strikes. The Shah, increasingly isolated and facing a revolution that defied traditional suppression, found himself without sufficient support. The Pahlavi dynasty, which had promised to bring Iran into modernity, was about to face its ultimate reckoning, paving the way for one of the most significant geopolitical shifts of the 20th century. Chapter 12: The Islamic Revolution and its Aftermath. The late 1970s saw Iran on the precipice of seismic change. The Pahlavi dynasty, for all its grand ambitions of modernization and its close ties to the West, faced a populace increasingly alienated by its authoritarianism, economic inequality, and secular reforms. The voice that galvanized this widespread discontent belonged to Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini, an exiled cleric whose pronouncements, circulated through cassette tapes and sermons, articulated a powerful vision of an independent, just, and Islamic Iran. What began as protests by students and religious groups quickly escalated into a mass movement encompassing diverse segments of society: disillusioned intellectuals, urban poor, traditional merchants, and the burgeoning middle class, all united by a shared desire for change and an end to the Shah's autocratic rule. Despite the Shah's attempts at conciliation and harsh repression, the momentum of the revolution became unstoppable. Strikes paralyzed the economy, mass demonstrations filled the streets of every major city, and the military, once the pillar of the Shah's power, began to fracture. On January 16, 1979, the Shah, ill and isolated, left Iran, ostensibly for a vacation. 2 weeks later, on February 1, Ayatollah Khomeini returned to a triumphant welcome from millions of Iranians. The old regime swiftly collapsed, and on April 1, 1979, a national referendum overwhelmingly approved the creation of the Islamic Republic of Iran. This was a revolution unlike any other, a modern revolution led by religious figures, aiming to establish a state based on Islamic principles. The immediate aftermath of the revolution was marked by consolidation of power and intense internal struggles. Various factions, including secular nationalists, Marxists, and different Islamic groups, had participated in overthrowing the Shah, but the dominant vision proved to be that of Khomeini and his conservative clerical followers. A new constitution was adopted, establishing the concept of Vilayat-e-Faqih, or guardianship of the Islamic jurist, which vested ultimate authority in a supreme leader, initially Khomeini himself. Revolutionary institutions, such as the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, IRGC, were created to protect the new system. Almost immediately, the fledgling Islamic Republic faced a devastating external threat. In September 1980, Iraq, under Saddam Hussein, launched a full-scale invasion of Iran. The Iran-Iraq War, 1980–1988, was a brutal, protracted conflict, often compared to World War I in its trench warfare, chemical weapons use, and immense casualties. For Iran, it was a war of survival. The conflict rallied the revolutionary government and galvanized national unity against an external enemy, solidifying the new regime's grip on power and fostering a deep sense of sacrifice and martyrdom. Despite heavy losses and international isolation, Iran resisted, eventually forcing Iraq to accept a ceasefire in 1988. The war's end was followed, a year later, by the death of Ayatollah Khomeini in 1989. His successor, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, inherited a nation that had endured immense hardship but remained committed to the ideals of the revolution. Over the subsequent decades, the Islamic Republic has navigated complex domestic and international challenges. Domestically, Iran has seen a constant interplay between hardliners and reformers, reflecting diverse interpretations of Islamic governance and societal needs. Presidents like Muhammad Khatami in the late 1990s pursued greater social and political openness, while others, like Mahmoud Ahmadinejad and Ebrahim Raisi, represented more conservative or principlist stances. Issues such as economic development, social freedoms, and the role of religion in daily life remain subjects of ongoing debate and occasional public protests. The country has a vibrant civil society, a large and well-educated youth population, and a dynamic cultural scene that often challenges official norms. On the international stage, Iran has asserted itself as a regional power. Its nuclear program, which it insists is for peaceful energy purposes, has been a source of intense international scrutiny and sanctions, leading to periods of heightened tension with Western powers. Iran's involvement in regional conflicts, its support for various non-state actors, and its complex relationships with its neighbors, like Saudi Arabia, Iraq, and Israel, continue to make it a central player in Middle Eastern geopolitics. Despite the political shifts and challenges, the ancient threads of Iranian civilization endure. Persian language, literature, and art continue to thrive, even as they adapt to modern forms. The deep historical consciousness, stretching back to ancient empires, remains a powerful force in national identity. From the Elamite settlements to the Achaemenid dream of universal empire, from the Sasanian revival of Persian grandeur to the Safavid forging of a Shurite nation, Iran has continuously absorbed, adapted, and reasserted its unique cultural identity. Today, Iran stands as a nation grappling with its rich, layered past, facing the complexities of its present, and charting an uncertain but undoubtedly significant future. It is a land where ancient whispers still echo in the bustling bazaars, where the phoenix continues its flight, forever rising from the ashes of its own enduring tales. If this journey through Iran's epic history moved you, please like this video to help others discover Persia's legacy, subscribe for deep dives into lost civilizations and empires, comment below, what era fascinated you most? The Achaemenids? Safavids? Let's discuss. Until our next exploration, keep the flame of history alive.